my name's Debra Macey and I work for Biffa Waste Services looking at our NHS proposition. As a waste management company, we're often seen as only dealing with the back end of waste, but in order to achieve net zero for the NHS, we need to incorporate ourselves within the internal structures of waste processes with every one of our healthcare clients. Today, we wanted to talk to you about moving away from the waste pyramid, the traditional way of looking at waste, but starting to look at the carbon hierarchy and the impact of waste that is entering our NHS and the processes that need to move those to disposal. We've done a slightly different format than when we were here last year. We've still got 3 guest speakers, but we wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity for everybody to engage with us and come to us with any questions. So our format today, we've got a short section from Simon, who's going to be discussing legislation and the impact in terms of changes within the government policies that will impact not only everybody but also the NHS. I'm going to pick up on the carbon hierarchy and the ways that we can kind of look at waste that enters the NHS and healthcare waste streams and the implications in terms of those processes. And then we've got a special guest today. We've got Gary. You might recognise his face, some of you in the audience. So Gary works for FSG. And it's looking at reusables and taking away those single-use products from the NHS and looking at how we can provide a circular economy. So I will now bring Simon up to speak to you.
Right, just talking about waste policy in the NHS, we're at a period of massive change at the moment with regard to waste policy. For those of you who work across the border in Wales, we had segregated recycling collections implemented as of April this last year for most businesses in Wales. The NHS were given a 2-year grace period, and the 2 years are being well used by some of the facilities managers and waste managers in Wales, and that they're actually introducing these segregated collections already well in advance of April 2026 when the Welsh Government require them to be introduced. So for other businesses, and that other business might be the concessions within the hospital, so the coffee shop, the newspaper and stationery shop, or just the general shop, those already have to have segregated collections of glass, mixed collections of cartons, metals and plastics, mixed paper and card, and food waste where they're producing more than 5 kilograms a week. But obviously for hospitals, they've got 2 years still to roll that out. But again, chatting to some of your colleagues, because the community locations and the smaller locations were frequently not classified as hospitals, they've been rolling this out already and utilising that as a stepping stone to full implementation in April 2026. Simple recycling is coming in England. We're supposedly going to be, as of April next year, at the end of March next year, we're going to be government are introducing requirements for us to collect metals, plastics, paper and card, glass, segregated food waste collections, and all of that will start from the end of March this next year. So again, not a lot of time. There are some exclusions for micro firms, so concessions where they've got less than 10 full-time equivalent employees, they're exempt, but that won't certainly cover the hospitals. The simple recycling requirements are simpler because you can mix the recycling. Now, as a business, the likelihood is many businesses are going to want people to segregate glass out where they're producing large quantities of glass because of the health and safety reasons around that. Again, not necessarily a particular issue for the NHS because many trusts will actually not allow glass in the catering side of things for fear of contamination. And frequently, the majority of the glass is probably from the drugs and the clinical side of things, which will obviously go through for high temperature incineration or down the clinical route. But again, it's going to be a big impact. We've seen a real difficulty in Wales in getting containers, in getting the number of bins, in getting the number of vehicles, and those we're still awaiting statutory guidance from government in England as to what we should do. Scotland remains the same as it has. We've had separate segregated recycling collections in Scotland since 2015, so and segregated food waste in Scotland since 2015. So that stays exactly as it is. So just a couple of big changes on the types of waste we collect and what we have to collect separately from the residual waste stream. Just a couple of other things, looking really a long way forward, just to have in mind when you're thinking about budgets. Energy from waste facilities fall into a carbon trading system called ETS, Emissions Trading System, and that's going to be introduced around about 2028 for energy from waste. Other facilities like steelworks and heavy energy users already have it, but they're rolling it out for EFW. And EFW operators will have to buy carbon allowances for every tonne of CO2 from fossil fuel sources that goes up that is burnt. They'll have to buy allowances. Now, current allowances in the last 2 years they've varied from £30 to £120. So the floor is just over £30. But clearly, that's going to impact on the residual waste costs for operators who are providing the services to the NHS. But the way of mitigating that is to really promote the segregation of the materials into the recycling stream. So that's why we started off with the simpler recycling and the separate collections in Wales. By doing that and getting the plastics out of the residual waste, you're reducing the impact of that going forward. So that's a real driver when we're introducing these simpler waste recycling collections, which again, many waste contractors will be talking about. So producing less waste is clearly what we're talking about, and our guest speaker is going to be talking about that. And it might seem odd that a waste management company is sitting here telling you to try and reduce your waste and to replace single use by reusable, but that is absolutely what we're doing. And as the sustainability manager of this business, I'm really pleased that we are. You can modify the waste segregation, which again many of you are, and working towards that. And again, removing plastics and fossil fuel derived materials, and education, which is the absolute key. Then just finally, supposedly coming on next year, and this is slightly uncertain with regard to timescales, because we haven't seen. I'm sure many of you are aware of government systems to IT systems and the difficulties in implementing those, but we're going to have one for digital waste tracking, which is supposedly starting in April next year. And again, this is going to require more data and data points and tracking from the waste producer right through the chain. Now, we're not too bad with this because we've got electronic handhelds in all of our cabs that pick up, and we have data systems in the background that track all that material and all that movements, whether it's collected from the waste compound at the exit at the back of the hospital or the A&E ward round near the front. We can track all of those, and hopefully when we see the government system, we can feed into that automatically. But just be aware, there's a positive around this in that the idea is around it is it reduces waste crime because you know absolutely where your material is going, but there are going to be some changes that are probably necessary, registering producers' sites and interacting with the tracking systems, both positively so that you can get data or give data to the system. As I say, as soon as we get to see the system, our IT teams are ready to go with this, but we think April next year is probably quite tight, given that we haven't actually seen the system. I sat down with the contractors in January, February this year, and they were building up use cases for tracking the collection of one skip that you might have rung for, and we will have delivered to you, and then we'll come and pick it up and drop it off. That was what they were doing. That was the use case they were starting with, which I applaud. You start with the simple bit, but then when you tell them how many bins you're collecting on the same site and how many different waste streams you're collecting on the same site, the realization of the difficulties around that were really quite key. So I'm just going to pass back now to Debra, that's going to talk a little bit about hierarchy.
As Simon says, it seems quite strange for a waste management company to look and talk about waste reduction. But in terms of what we're doing is we're looking at not only waste reduction, but also the carbon reduction of all the products that enter the NHS supply chain. There's a huge impact in terms of moving waste around. So what we're looking at is how we can work with NHS clients to reduce the impact of products that you buy in on a daily basis. One of the key areas we're looking about is how recyclable products are. If we take the example of the simple disposable coffee cup, in essence, coffee cups are recyclable, but actually, by standard methods, they can't go into your dry mix recycling. So what we're looking at is various items that enter into the supply chain with the NHS and really how recyclable they are. In order for a product to be recycled, when it actually gets picked up by a collection truck, it needs to go through a series of hoops and processes in order to be fully recyclable. So what we are doing is we're working with supply chain on products that come into the NHS to make sure that they can be presented in the best way so that they can enter a closed loop system. There's lots of challenges within the NHS in terms of labelling, so we're working with suppliers to make sure that products that come into you are actually able to go through the system. We're looking at reduction of single-use products. So again, within the NHS, there's a lot in terms of PPE and single-use items. So we're offering supply chain and packaging consultancy so that we can look at the individual products that you bring in and the ways that we can reduce them. Eric's reporting data is power. I had a conversation with somebody earlier and they were talking about they get data on their food waste, but what does that actually tell them? So we're looking at things like plate waste versus catering waste and canteen waste. And we can put in place contracts that can break that down so you can do some real analytical data. In terms of best practice, we're looking at league tables within the NHS. What we do with some of our other sectors is we look at a kind of a great to good in terms of what a waste per head looks like. And we're working with our NHS contracts to deliver that as well. It's interesting when you think about segregation. So during my role, I visit large numbers of NHS trusts, and I understand that the HTMO7 directive is an all-encompassing, this is how waste should be processed. However, when we're actually on individual locations, we notice there's various differences in signage, there's differences in training, and there's differences in kind of container configuration as well. And we want to work with our NHS clients to see what is the best solution that we can do. So it would be great to have some feedback after the session in terms of the challenges that you have in terms of segregation from training and that kind of side of things as well. Looking about sort of account management and things that we need to look out from a, oh, sorry, next slide, beg your pardon there. The other thing that we're looking at as a business in terms of the Public Procurement Act are things that we can add value to in terms of waste contracts as well. So challenges that you have from delivery of social value initiatives, the commitment that you have in terms of the 10% for the Public Procurement Act in terms of engaging with local communities and local employment as well. We've got a training platform for the healthcare sector on waste that we're launching. We'd be quite interested for people to sort of pre-register in terms of looking at that launch on our stand afterwards, so you can have a look and review it and see how that works. What we wanted to do was to kind of do a training platform that gave best practice in terms of what needs to happen at the back end, but also work in partnership with you at the front end as well. As a business, we have consultants such as Simon that are looking at sort of the compliance side of things and making sure that everybody's upskilled in terms of future legislation. In terms of partnerships, we can't achieve net zero in isolation alone. So what we look at is partnership with the NHS, but also with other key stakeholders within waste management processes. So there's things like food distribution through the Aleo network, hard to recycle plastics and enteral feed bottle recycling projects, but also reusable options. And we're very pleased to have Gary here from FSG Reusables with us today to talk about the replacement of single-use options for reusable items. Once Gary finishes the slot after, we're going to have a Q&A session, so we'd be really pleased if you could come to us with some ideas of challenges that you face on a daily basis. Okay, thank you. Gary?
Lovely. Flick that across. Yeah, okay. Lovely. So, let's see. On the red or the green? Green. Green is good. It means next. Lovely. As you may have gathered, IT is not my forte, but we're not here to talk about IT. So that's Very, very fortunate for me. Shall we start with how refreshing is it? How refreshing. You've got a huge waste management company and they're talking recycling, reducing waste. So while lots of people talk the talk, there are some waste companies that are walking the walk. So thank you, Biffa, leading from the front. Excellent. So why do you think Biffa and the NHS see this as such a massive problem? Single use, single waste disposables. Does everyone agree it's a huge problem? Okay, anyone want to have a guess how many single-use items we are using a year? Anyone want to go 50 million? 500 million? A couple of billion? I'm not getting many bids out there. So, between the hours of 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., the amount of single waste disposables we use for several minutes and throw away is this very small number. Are you ready? 10.7 million. No, sorry, billion. That was an accidental mistake. 10.7 billion. Now, hopefully, if anyone thought this was a medium-sized problem, once you now have that information, you realize how massive a problem this is. 10.7 billion. Say it to yourself. We've managed to stop 358 million single-use items. Nowhere near good enough. Without collaboration with the likes of Biffa, we are going to be way down in the 3rd or 4th division. Now, I was very lucky to live in Copenhagen, and they don't call it wonderful for nothing, during the 1990s. And they were way ahead of us when it came to all things recycling, repurposing, cleanliness. I could go on till the cows come home. The last couple of years, we are really back in the game. The UK and Ireland are really back in the game. So well done. And guess who's leading that? For a good part, it's the NHS. Yeah? We all see in the press how easy it is to rubbish the NHS. Well, actually, I do not concur. When it comes to returnables and reusables and solving this massive problem, the NHS is ahead of most of the rest. So give yourself a little tap on the shoulder there. So the first people to go from single waste to returnables, Chester University. In 2012, that's how long this journey's been going on. We were formed in 2009. This has been a long, hard slog. But Chester University in 2012 banned all their single use, whether that be foodware or drinkware. They got rid of all of those and moved over to returnables, a minimum of 1,000+ times through a commercial dishwasher or a microwave. Anyone want to hazard a guess how many of those reusable items are still in use today? Because you might think, why would we go to returnables? Because they're going to maybe last a little bit longer than disposables. Well, you would be incorrect. Chester University, 12 years on, are still using just over 50% of the returnables, the quality returnables they procured in 2012. No wonder they have saved a fortune. So, we've talked about the problem. Everybody knows what the problem is. Most children of 7 or 8 know what a massive problem it is. But what about the solution? We know there's a huge problem. What about the solution? Well, it's not rocket science. And I know here in this room, there's lots of you that are probably working 45, 50 hours a week saying, I know, Gary, I should have been on this journey with Biffa, with FSG 5, 10, 15 years ago. Don't beat yourself up and don't cry over spilt milk. It's a waste of energy. Look to the future. We have only upgraded just over 100 hospitals. There's many, many more to work with. A lot of the brave hospitals, they're in this exhibition today. Please seek them out and find them and ask them about their massive carbon emission savings, their massive waste savings, and their huge financial savings. It might prompt you to look at this, because this is an absolute no-brainer. It's very low-hanging fruit. But don't try and do it on your own. Reach out to companies like Biffa and FSG. We can give you untold amounts of collaboration and help and collateral. So, the solution, if anyone is left guessing, is returnables. How many times can those returnables be used? A minimum of 1,000 times. Some of these figures, they need to be really registering for you, because hopefully you can see then your massive savings across the board once you go from the wrong side of the sustainability tracks to the right side of the sustainability tracks. Reusables versus disposables. Do I really have to say any more on that? Has that not been covered off? Please speak to your NHS clients. If you don't understand the answer to that question, please seek out Biffa, seek out myself, or seek out your many, many dozens of NHS colleagues, whether they be in the sustainability teams, the waste teams, the catering teams. They will all give you the same answer. It's an absolute no-brainer. No more time to waste. So, the savings. There's a huge financial, a massive carbon reduction, and a huge waste saving. No two hospitals are the same. You have to look at each hospital individually. It's very consultative. Anybody who tells you that one hat fits all the different hospitals is, I would say, being disingenuous. If you want to go on this journey properly, you are going to have to roll your sleeves up. Biffa and myself can give you an awful lot of help, but you will have to roll your sleeves up and do some help yourself. So, there are lots of other savings, but I'm not going to go into them. About 27. But let's just stick with carbon, financial, and waste. They tend to concentrate most people's minds very loudly and very clearly. So, return on investment and implementation guide. See, so far you've probably thought, this is too good to be true. So what's the return on investment? Any guesses? 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, 9 years? Anyone want to have a guess? When you go from single waste disposables to returnables 1,000 plus times. Any guesses? Average hospital? 2 years. Who said that? Well done for being brave. I'm all alone up here. Well done. Thank you. Just me and my returnable cup, 1,000 plus times. 2 years is a great effort. It's usually between 5 and 9 months. So 2 years is very good. Most people say 3, 5, 7, 9 years. They couldn't be further from the truth. That's why I've told you this is an absolute no-brainer. On average, anywhere between 5 and 9 months. Well done. So there is an implementation guide. Anybody who tells you it's really simple to go from disposables, luckily for me I don't have one, to reusables, anybody who tells you that's a really, really simple project to do by yourself, I would say they are being disingenuous. You need to reach out to people with the expertise and the experience and the collateral and the collaboration that will make it much, much easier for you. So you need to speak to the likes of the Biffas, but we can't do it all for you. You are going to have to roll your sleeves up. You need to get to not just the stakeholders, You need to go right through with your communication. If you're going to do the conversion on the 1st of December 2024 or 2025, you need to, a month before that, a minimum 4 weeks before that, you need to get the message out there. Your comms team, your sustainability teams, your catering teams, and of course your FM teams, you need to get them all engaged. Whether it's digital signage, whether it's physical signage, you need to do it all. Now you're probably thinking, oh my God, this is so complicated. Please reach out. 16 years of knowledge makes it a lot easier. We can help. Behavioural change. Anybody guess how long we've been doing single waste disposables? How many decades? 50. 5 decades. My goodness me. There's a lady there who knows her stuff. The very first McDonald's restaurant came to London in 1974. Now, maths is not my subject, but I think that's 50 years ago. 2024, 1974. I think that's around about 50 years. So we have been doing single waste disposables for 50 years. It's time to change. Let's wake up and smell the coffee, not from a single waste cup, from a returnable 1,000 plus times cup. Okay, I'm not going to go into greenwashing. You're all very educated people. You can go onto Google. You can read the reports from the BBC, from the Sunday Telegraph, and there are hundreds about the greenwashing. Please do not let yourself be taken down the greenwashing line. Educated people, do your research, do your due diligence. There's a lot of companies in this space that are quoting gibberish. Please don't get taken in by gibberish. Please ask for LCAs, life cycle analysis. Please ask for black and white, the truth. Let's just call it the truth, because it is out there if you're willing to find it.